Welcome to Daniel's Inferno. My name is Daniel. Thank you for joining me today. So, today's topic is going to be talking about how Canadian free speech is under attack by the officially sanctioned, at least under our current Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Canadian MAFIA, or the LBGTQS2 plus Mafia.
Here, intolerance will not be tolerated.
So, why am I calling them a mafia, you may be asking yourselves, and what am I talking about? Well, let's get into it today. In Toronto, one of the biggest cities of Canada, and it's probably also one of the most well-known cities, had Meghan Murphy, or a well-known feminist, come and talk at a library, a public library. She came and rented a space. So this article by The Globe really paints quite a one-sided picture. It talks about this individual, Gwen Benaway, who was winning an award for poetry, the Governor General Award. And she, I guess, was at this protest. The LBGTQ plus community wanted the talk canceled. The Toronto Public Library, however, was unflinching. Good for them, I have to say. Very good for them for not wavering on this. I'll talk a bit about why I don't think Meghan Murphy is transphobic in a moment, but they say the event does not violate the hate speech policy. Apparently, however, by allowing these type of voices, the library is opening us or the community up to hate and ridicule. They contribute to a very harmful environment for trans people. Now let's just stop there for a moment, and I'd like to say something. I don't think that having free speech encourages a harmful environment for trans people. Of course, I think that hating on other people for who they are or how they're living, no, that's not okay. Very clearly, I'm not supporting that. I'm not supporting attacking trans people for being trans at all. I am saying, however, we should ridicule people who attack free speech, because free speech is the cornerstone of our society. Apparently, this individual has been inundated online with her hate speech since winning the award for her poetry. So I'm gonna stop there again. Every person who is a public figure in some way, politicians, award winners, YouTubers, influencers, all these people, because they're in the public arena, they have opened themselves up to criticism and for nasty people to say nasty things. Unfortunately, that's the world, okay? I'm not here to protect every single person in the world. People, that's not our job. People need to have some responsibility for their own protection. I do understand the need to ensure that we don't allow mass harassment. I'm not saying that. But apparently it's these type of hateful reactions online or otherwise that are indicative of what can grow from holding these events. Again, I think that this just happens when you're a public figure. I don't think allowing an event, and apparently the Toronto Public Library defended its decision under the guise of free speech, she said, and it's deflective of the problem it can create for trans folk. Let's say the only good point in this article that is, well, I guess only 2 points that are made in this article are anyone essentially that it's not a civil discussion when you're saying you're a man and you are a threat and you're dangerous and you're ugly. That's not a civil discussion. That's not even a discussion. And so that's one of her arguments. So if that's what people are saying, that's wrong. That is not an argument. That's just being hateful and nasty. But guess what? My roommate ran into an individual trying to get on the bus the other day, and she tried to stop this person from ramming past an individual on a wheelchair, and this person lost their mind on my roommate. So guess what? Just people can have these type of reactions to anybody. It's not like trans folk are unique in that sense of being ridiculed and attacked. Public figures and communities get ridiculed and attacked. Like look at back in what, the 50s, the 60s, when the civil rights movement was happening for the black community, and the hate and the division that was happening to them back then. Look at today. I'm sorry that people may not like this, but the white community is attacked relentlessly today. Toxic masculinity, white men, evil white men, all of this. I've had people told me that my opinion is invalid because I'm white, or that I'm privileged because I'm white. Well, you don't really know my situation. You don't know anyone's situation, so you can't. I did a video on privilege. If you're interested, I won't get back into that. I apologize. And the other good point that I want to point out is that it's not a discussion when you only listen to one side. And apparently the librarian was only listening to one side. They're clearly not interested in listening to trans people. They want to be able to hold us up as a paragon of them being inclusive, but their actions don't line up with their words. So that is also true. A discussion involves two sides. It's not one-sided. Discussions aren't discussions. They're just people talking at you and giving their one-sided view. So my argument against that point, however, is that the amount of media coverage, amount of noise, and the amount of people you were able to generate to try to stop this event, guess what kind of reaction it had? Well, let's look. After the protest, Toronto votes to review community space policies. So Toronto and the councillors of Toronto put forward a motion that passed to review whether existing rules governing the use of city community spaces by third parties uphold the city's policies supporting equity, diversity, and human rights, and its policies against discrimination and harassment. So Meghan Murphy believes trans rights are at odds with women's rights, that trans women should not be allowed in women's washrooms and should not participate in women's sports. The decision by city librarian to let Murphy speak, even in the face of mounting protests, deeply wounded members of the trans community, many of whom are long-standing library supporters, the councillor who put forward the motion told fellow councillors on Wednesday. Just because you're a supporter of an institution does not mean that institution should give you preferential treatment. So let's talk quickly just about Meghan Murphy and why I don't think what she says is actually transphobic. I'm not trying to argue that I don't think that transphobia exists in society today, because obviously there are people who are transphobic and hate against others for their decisions in life and who they are and how they choose to represent themselves. I understand that people like that exist. That's not the argument. The argument is Meghan Murphy is trying to say that when we rush things, like things have been rushed recently, or at least they seemingly have been quite rushed, you get people like Jessica Yaniv. And for those who don't know, she's a Canadian male to female trans woman who tried to sue, lost thankfully, but tried to sue a waxing place for refusing to wax her balls. What? That's not their job. I'm sorry. That's not, and that's exactly why she lost the case. But you get people who exploit the system. You get people like in the UK where you have drag queen story time. And you have these drag queens who have every right to do story time. But you have some of them who are perverts who are coming and flashing the kids, trying to like invite the kids place. Like, you get people who abuse the system. All right? You're going to get people who claim unduly that they are X or Y in terms of how they feel or how they represent themselves, and they are going to abuse the policies. Obviously, we can't stop all abuses from happening, but we need to be mindful that abuses can happen and that we need to protect the people who are being abused by this stuff. So the kids, in terms of the drag queen story hour, or women in terms of when we just say, okay, men to women, trans folk can immediately use women's washrooms, and that's just at the end of the discussion. Well, her point is, again, is that these things get abused. So we need to try to actively seek a solution for both sides. We can't just say one side is wrong, one side is right. That's not, no. We need to come to a communal decision on this. At least that's my opinion. We need to make, there is a way to do this, that trans people get the rights they deserve and that they're entitled to, while still protecting the rights of individuals that were already existing. So in the case of the women's washrooms or women's sports, we can ensure that when male to female athletes who, because they were originally biologically men and are biologically men, they have larger bone structure, they have testosterone in the system, that means their bones are bigger, that means their muscles are bigger, that means the propensity for strength is larger. Well, that gives an undue advantage, and that's what Meghan Murphy argues when it comes to trans people in sports. And I don't, and Joe Rogan has talked about this a few times, and I believe Joe Rogan and Meghan Murphy are both correct that there are abuses being held in these places, and we need to review it and we need to deal with it. We cannot just say we're turning a blind eye to it, because if we even dare speak about it, or if we even dare try to question whether or not this is amicable, then we get labeled as transphobic, which is what happens. I mean, I'm sure people will call me transphobic, and I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm not. And you can shove it if you think I'm transphobic after this video. Just my opinion. Thank you all for watching. I'm Daniel's Inferno. Have a wonderful day.